Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. I just had a conversation with somebody, perfectly polite conversation, and it's something that I have, I guess, upset people before with an opinion of mine. So I wanted to talk about it one final time on this channel and make absolutely certain that I am, I guess, explaining myself correctly. That at least if people are upset at me, they're upset at me for the right reason, like for something that I actually think, and that they're not misunderstanding me and being upset with that misunderstanding, right? So let me just go through this real quick. Shouldn't be a super long video, I hope. I have expressed before, and I hold to it strongly, the belief that less expensive animals are far more likely to be neglected or even like abused in worse ways. Not that neglect isn't horrible, some types of neglect are deadly. This is just absolute truth. I'm sorry, they are, and I'll dive into that a little bit. But I took it further by saying I am attempting to alter my entire breeding projects so that I'm only producing animals above a certain price point. I'm not talking, oh, anything below $5,000 is terrible. That's not what I'm saying. But I want my animals to be $300 or $400 at minimum. I didn't used to want that. I thought I really want any customer of any financial status to be able to buy a snake if they want to. I no longer want that. So that has made some people very upset. And people keep taking what I'm saying, or I'll talk about, a statistic that is generalized over an entire population, and they personalize it as if I am saying they themselves are this way. And when they're not that way, they get very upset, as if I'm accusing them of something. I'm not. I'm talking about a statistic, okay, over an entire group of people. So, here's how I arrived at this conclusion. I have now talked extensively to the point of almost it being like an interview with multiple owners of various reptile rescues in different states. Okay? And the animals that are being surrendered, or the animals that have been left behind in an apartment and then turned over to them at some point by someone else, the animals that are being left in boxes at their doorstep, the animals that they see who have horrible medical problems going on, left untreated for a ridiculous amount of time, are almost entirely extremely cheap animals, $100 or less. A ton of red-eared sliders, bearded dragons, normal bearded dragons, not morphs, ball pythons, not morphs, just normals, leopard geckos, those sorts of things, corn snakes, things that are very, 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 very readily accessible and very cheap, often purchased at big box pet stores. Often, but not always, bought kind of spur of the moment without a lot of pre-planning. And it sucks a lot because a lot of people love their normal ball python. I know I do. I know a lot of other people that do. And I mean I have ball pythons that I've spent several $1,000s on veterinary care, and they're worth like $50. Okay? I'm not going to not take care of them just because they're cheap. And this is where people get upset. They're like, yeah, I wouldn't either. I would never do that. I wouldn't mistreat them that way. I wouldn't value them so low. Just because their financial value is low doesn't mean their intrinsic value is low. I'm right with you. I agree. The problem is, an unfortunately large number of people do not agree. If they did not spend big dollars on the item, and in this case, they're thinking of an animal as the item, they are not going to value it. If they get bored of it, guess who's not getting fed as often as it should be? If they get into some sort of housing situation where they have to change housing really quick, guess who's getting left behind? If the animal gets ill, guess who's not getting any medical care? And a lot of people are this way. So it is not, and this is the crux of it. So let me say this last piece. It is absolutely not that the wealthy people who are able to buy the super expensive animals are better people, who treat animals better, value them more, etc. And that the poor people who can only get a $30 leopard gecko or whatever are just neglectful and mean and don't value their animals. That is absolutely and entirely not the case. But people who are going to come to me and buy a sailfin dragon, a rare lizard, it's quite expensive. The housing for that lizard is very expensive. They are not somebody who is getting an animal as an impulse buy. Almost ever. Pretty much never. People who are really into impulse buying reptiles don't even know that sailfin dragons exist. So this is somebody who's done their research, often for months or years. They've saved up a lot of money. They've dedicated part of their house to a very large enclosure. They've built that enclosure to very specific environmental requirements. They have asked me dozens of questions about diet, or me or someone else, about diet, humidity, temperature, space, water, cleanliness, all these things. And now they're coming to me and they're buying an animal. That is simply not the type of person, whether they're poor or wealthy, because a poor person can save up hundreds of dollars. It might take them a long time, but I know that not every single person who's bought one of these lizards from me is super wealthy. So it's nothing to do with your income status. It's everything to do with, are you the type of person that is buying the exact animal you want and you are dedicated to it? It's been a long-term plan. Maybe the animal you want is a normal ball python and you're spoiling it, and it's in a 10-foot enclosure. Everything's bioactive. It's got an exercise room. That would be fantastic. I hope that you do so if that's your dream animal. But that's most of the time going to be the case with an extremely expensive animal. Somebody who is impulse buying is not going to spend that kind of money. They're just not. They're not going to make that kind of enclosure. And from the breeder's perspective, where I am responsible, these animals wouldn't exist if I didn't breed them, right? They wouldn't exist. So at some level, even though they're going to a new home, I feel responsible. And if I know that statistically they are 10, 20, 30 times more likely to have a terrible life if they are a cheap animal, I no longer want to breed them. I can't know for certain, no matter how carefully I ask questions. Sometimes I've asked people to show me pictures of their enclosure if it's somebody that I feel like maybe they don't really know what they're doing yet. Not even that I suspect oh, I think this is a bad person, but just oh, they seem to not be super experienced. Let me ask a bunch of follow-up questions. Even when I'm super careful, I can't actually know these people. I'm not going to their house. I'm not seeing how their other animals are treated. I can try really hard to get a feel for how it's going to be, but that's not going to be perfect, right? And so I would feel so guilty knowing that I pumped a bunch of super cheap animals into the world, sent them out to a bunch of new homes, and some of them are absolutely being neglected to the point of abuse. So I'm just not going to do that. I'm trying to alter how I do my breedings so that everything I produce is at least $300 or $400 and up. And that will dramatically, almost entirely eliminate the chances of my animals being abused. Um, it's very, very sad that this is how we have to think. That these are the types of people I have to worry about and try and keep my animals out of their hands. But people who are like that are far, far less likely to spend $500 than $50 on the animal that they clearly just don't really value that highly, right? So I hope that helps. This is not an attack on poor people. By many measures, I'm a poor people. It's not an attack on certain types of animals. I think that a normal ball python deserves every speck as much effort on our part as keepers as a $10,000 Boelen's python, right? I think that people should be held to some level of not experience. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to get at. But they should have done their research, right, before they get their animal. But I'm not saying they have to be perfect. So that's the last thing, and then I'm going to go. If somebody makes a mistake that they didn't know something was wrong, even if it ends catastrophically, I'm not always lumping those people in with the people I've been talking about in this video who are just neglectful and they don't value the animal. People make mistakes. They didn't have a key piece of information. I've talked to people who knew quite a lot. They read a lot. They talked to a lot of people. They watched a lot of YouTube videos, and they happened to miss something crucial, and something bad happened. I'm not blaming those people. I wish that didn't happen to those animals, but this is still somebody who can be a very, very good keeper. A lot of them are beating themselves up years later still that this happened, and I'm perfectly happy to work with people like that and get them a new animal, help them figure out what went wrong and how to avoid it in the future. So I'm not talking about that kind of thing. You know, if something goes wrong and the animal doesn't get what it needs, it's not always that the person is a bad person. I guess that's all I'm saying here to finish this video. So I hope that this cleared up my take on this issue, why I am no longer willing to breed $50 normals. And once the animals that I have that are less expensive than that price point are sold, I will just not be producing animals like that anymore. That's how it is. And I feel like that should become widespread and more breeders should probably adopt this practice. Of course, I have no right to make them or shame them or anything like that, but I feel like from the animal's perspective, that would be better. And that's a sad statement on a lot of people. So, oh well. But that is all. Thank you for tuning in to my little explanation video here. And it went a little longer than I wanted, but I wanted to make absolutely certain that I'm clear with what I'm saying, so that if you're still upset at me, at least you're upset for something that I actually said. So, that is all. Thank you guys so much for watching. Till next time, we're the Reptile Barn.